He's got one foot in the frying pan and one in the pressure cooker. Believe me, as a bowler, I know that right about now, your bladder feels like an overstuffed vacuum cleaner bag, and your butt is kind of like an about to explode bratwurst.
Hey, you mind? I wasn't talking when you were bowling.
Was I talking out loud?
Welcome to Munsons at the Movies. My name is Kyle. I will once again be your host. Joined by the rest of the Munsons. Want to give them a wide berth.
What is called a born loser? A real Munson.
And talk a little bit about what's going on in the world. This time we'll start with Case.
Well, we're just coming off the 2024 Olympics. I think it's time that we as a country acknowledge that a beautiful sport that originated in the United States is now the world sport. And by that, of course, you guys know I'm talking about breakdancing. Born in the Bronx, I was pretty disappointed, United States performance, but at the same time confused by the results. But I do know three things that were lacking from almost all the American performances. Number one, I didn't see the worm. I mean, just generally speaking, I think it's a staple.
I agree.
Number two, no popping and locking cost us medals. And then finally, I didn't see the robot at all. My hat's off to the world for taking breakdancing from us. You're welcome. I'm going to act in solidarity with the U.S. breakdancing team tonight, and I'm going to perform this episode under the name B-Boy Case.
Look at Aubrey's face.
I can't.
Breakdance. It was born in the Bronx and murdered by an Australian in Paris, France.
I've got two syllables for you, James. Ray Gun.
Gun.
Let's fucking go.
You mean to tell me there's not a Jabberwocky available to just go put on a show for the rest of the world and just let them know like where they stand? Like, come on.
There's like 5 seasons of that show.
I know, and they were amazing.
All the people were available.
Jabberwocky available.
Cheers, world. You're welcome.
I did not watch breakdancing at the Olympics. And as a person who, over the course of his entire life, has been slowly watching this music and culture that I love so dearly be popularized, taken, and destroyed. It really just speaks volumes that it's now reached its pinnacle point.
The Olympics.
And the Olympics have now been like, no, hip hop is ours. And I just can't. I can't cope with this.
In hindsight, you made the right decision. I tormented myself.
Do you feel cultured, Case?
B-Boy Case is here tonight. Don't worry about it. Ready to talk some Goldie Hawn.
All right, how about you, James?
A couple weeks in at the new job, things are going well, but more importantly than that, fantasy football season has started and I am the reigning champion in a fantasy league, and my wife doesn't seem to care. That bothers me. No one seems to care, and it bothers me. But I will say that I get to choose the punishment for whoever scores the least amount of points for each week. And I'm leaning heavily that they have to perform whatever is the most popular TikTok dance. I think that is the move for a league of men in their mid to late 30s. I think that would be the funniest for me personally.
Make them do U.S. Open qualifying for the PGA Tour.
For golf.
Because anyone could do that. Someone did that 2 years ago. And then he had to go out to U.S. Open qualifying, and he shot like 100 and something. It was hilarious.
Of course.
That's brilliant.
All right, what about you, Aubrey?
Not much going on. School's back. Into the Spider-Verse, and the film class went well, obviously.
I would have quit if it didn't, to be honest.
Okay.
And the problem that I've kind of walked into now is everyone wants to take this class because all the kids last year loved it.
Yeah.
But most of the kids last year were there for movies. These kids are just there. Easy A, da-da-da. And I'm like, oh. So Social Network was this week.
Ooh.
That's always the second movie to talk about screenwriting. Mm-hmm. They're in. I'll find out for sure tomorrow, but they were in. I was getting questions about like copyright infringement and shit like that. And I'm like, do you know how to spell that, sir? Why are you asking me about this?
Oh, so they put together the point real quick. They were like, oh, he's not a great guy. Got it. Understood.
They seem to get after it, but we'll see.
Yeah.
This is where it gets dicey, though. His Girl Friday is next.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
This is a room full of people that think almost every one of them said they've never seen a black and white movie.
It's going to be tough because I struggle with that myself. And obviously I love movies, but sometimes these older movies, they don't mesh with me.
This one played well last time. Last year it went over well because the dialogue is really fast paced. And I mean, it's Cary Grant. Like, Cary Grant.
Yeah.
Might be the GOAT. And that comes across. So they did well with that one last year. So the secondary hard part with a movie like that, because I think His Girls Friday was made in the 40s, I think.
It was.
Is the morals are all over the place.
Dicey?
So they get to the end and they're like, what just happened? And I'm like, yeah, some stuff you just got to overlook, guys. It's a different time.
Yeah, a very different time.
But His Girl Friday is a must watch.
In my world, I have been reacclimating with a little website, little lesser known website called eBay. I don't know if any of you guys have been heard about that lately, that it still exists.
Yep.
One of my jobs, one of my clients, we are doing an 80s night at a conference, and the group decided, let's buy a bunch of 80s board games.
Cool.
So I was looking up like vintage board games from the 80s, and the only place you can really get, other than like going to your local thrift shop, is to go to eBay and buy them from private sellers. And so I've bought games like Tinkers there's one called Dweebs, Geeks, and Weirdos.
Good name.
It's a fantastic name. It's for kids, but I don't care. I'm going to make adults play it. Fast Facts. So I've just like been learning about the board game world of the 1980s, and it's been fascinating as I wait for these puppies to come in the mail, and they're generally in pretty good shape. I thought it was fitting given we're covering an actor who's very prolific in the 80s.
Yeah.
The other thing I'm a little bit more worried about personally is Case's hero, Christopher Bridges. I saw a video where he drank some water from a glacier, and I'm not sure if anybody's seen or heard from him since. And I'm a little worried about his well-being. Case, if you could send out a carrier pigeon to figure out where Christopher is at for all of our sake, I would appreciate that.
I'll shoot Ludo a text. He might have one of those giant fists for real after drinking that water.
Use the phrase, I'll shoot Luda a text with complete seriousness.
Not a hint of irony in that statement whatsoever.
No.
If you had said, I'll send Christopher a text, then I would believe you more.
There's no way people call him that.
Looks like I got to come up with a new fact for trivia.
Is that not where they're shooting the next Fast movie? Is that what they're doing?
Probably.
Because there's too much money tied up in that for him to just be loose in the Arctic somewhere.
Fair point.
But speaking of people that we can't track down because they may be unhealthy at this moment, Dan Craig is supposed to be here tonight as our featured guest. Dan is a high school English and film teacher and has the dubious distinction of knowing Craig Case for the past 20 plus years. Having joined us previously for Chris O'Dowd, Tim Roth, Willem Dafoe, David Spade, Maggie Smith, and William Atherton. Today, he technically becomes the first 7-time guest Munson, but he's apparently doesn't have a voice at this moment in time. So if you hear Dan Craig throughout the episode, it will be him in post in a hopefully healthier state, providing his feedback on things.
And if you don't hear him, he's here trying to talk still.
We just cut him out of the recording because it sounded awful. That's a good point. He's always fun too. So we'll do our best without him here in episode 106 talking about Goldie Hawn. Let's have some fun. All right, birthday's September 5th. First off, we've got Michael Keaton, best known for films like Beetlejuice, Birdman, Spotlight, The Founder, Batman, Dope Sick, White Noise, Mr. Mom, Multiplicity, and Morbius. How old is Michael Keaton? He's in some bangers, except for Morbius.
Morbius.
I love him in The Founder.
Yes, The Founder is a great shout. That movie is underrated.
Fantastic film.
He just plays that like really cunning kind of sleazeball very well.
Mm-hmm.
He nails it. Great range.
Great range.
It's incredible.
He's going to be on Hot Ones as Beetlejuice next week, too.
Wait, is he going to be dressed up?
Yeah, he's supposed to be dressed as Beetlejuice on Hot Ones.
That's hysterical. That's incredible.
But how old is this legend, Michael Keaton?
65.
71.
I'm trying to do some math. What would it be if he was born in 58?
When we were allowed to do math now.
Thinking he was about 30 years old when he made Batman. Okay, yeah, 66. I don't know why I'm trying this hard.
I love you trying this hard, but James is right because he's turning 73. Michael Keaton
nice.
is,
What?
yeah, he's youthful.
I undershot that way.
Yes, he did.
That was a bad guess.
Don't go chasing waterfalls.
That's right. Next up, we got Rose McGowan, known for roles like Planet Terror, Grindhouse, Charmed, Aubrey
Yes.
and I's one of our favorites.
Charm.
Ready to Rumble, Scream, and Biodome. How old is Rose McGowan?
Ooh.
Love Rose McGowan. She is forever this age. 24.
Yeah. She hates Hollywood too now.
She does.
Oh yeah, it's very, very clear.
He does.
You can only get sexualized for so many decades before you're like, I hate this world.
I agree with Aubrey. In my mind, she's in a time capsule of like 1996. And so I got to do the math there. And my guess would say then 44.
I think she and I have a lot in common, sort of like Luda and I, and that makes her 48.
He's making a move right now?
Oh, well, she's turning 51. Case gets the win there.
Well done.
Proud of you, man. Last and certainly not least, an actor that I can promise is not nearly as young as the other two, and that's Bob Newhart, who died on July 18th of 2024. He died a month ago.
Okay.
Oh,
Yes, he did.
I was going to ask, I was like, Kyle, I always want to make sure, and I'm pretty sure I'm correct about this one.
This is a rest in peace moment for Bob Newhart, an actor that was in films such as Elf, In and Out, Newhart, obviously, Horrible Bosses. I don't know why, but that's the first thing I think of when he says, my new boss is a twisted old fuck. Bob Newhart show. And how old would Bob be today if he hadn't died on July?
Yeah, if Bob didn't just die and his family was still grieving, he would have made it to 83. I don't know.
91.
I am a Bob Newhart fan, and I will say he is arguably one of the funniest people in the world. I know the answer. You want me to go ahead and just finish it off, Kyle?
Yeah, absolutely.
If Bob Newhart were still making everybody laugh today, he would have been 95.
That is correct. So Case wins that one.
Oh, 2 out of 3, boys.
It would have been embarrassing if you got that wrong. I just want you to know.
Technically, I won the Rose McGowan one. Kyle said I win every time, so.
Fair enough, sir.
Happy birthday to those three and anybody else with a birthday on September 5th. All right, we had 5 actors for episode 106 we threw onto the wheel. They were Christopher Fairbank, Blythe Danner, Donnie Yen, Lynn Redgrave, but it doesn't matter because the wheel selected Goldie Hawn. Goldie has 39 credits to her resume, 10 producing credits, and has directed 1 project over the years. But before we get into those 39 credits, which is the smallest filmography we've seen in a while, we always start with a little actor trivia and see if James can stump us Fast and Furious style.
Absolutely. So I'm going to read off 3 facts here, 2 of which are going to be true about the woman of the hour, Goldie Hawn. One of them is not going to be true about her, but is going to be true about one of the many illustrious cast members of the Fast and Furious franchise. The gentlemen here are going to have to guess which one that is. Fact number 1. Her name was found to be the last written words of Walt Disney on his desk the day after he died. Fact number 2. She had the police called on her when she broke into a home that she had purchased because she didn't have the keys on her, and the neighbors thought that she was being robbed. Fact number 3. She once thought that she'd been discovered by a talent scout who had set her up on an audition, only to realize when she arrived that it was a pimp who had set her up with a paying celebrity whom she had recognized.
Oh, I want all 3 of them to be true. Clearly, number 2 is the lie about the breaking into her own home, because that's obviously about her partner, Kurt Russell. It's the only way James can do the lie tonight, is it has to be about a Kurt Russell lie.
I'm going to do my Walt Disney one first because it'll make me laugh, and Kyle can do his, which will probably be better. But I think number 1, and obviously it's Iggy Azalea.
Of all the names for people to find on your desk after you pass away, and it's just some like borderline OnlyFans rapper, it's like, oh, that would just be tough. It's a tough scene. She's really spitting on this. She's pretty good.
I'm doing a lot of research right now.
Iggy Azalea.
I'm going to try to make fetch happen here. I had to do some extensive research on this one. I think fact 1 is false. It's probably not because I can't make the numbers work, but I'm going to do my best here. The problem with fact 1 is that Walt Disney died in 1966, so you have to find an actor from Fast and Furious who's old enough to have been in a picture by 1966. So I went to Helen Mirren. Helen Mirren's first role was in 1969, so maybe she was in a low-budget something in 1966. Helen Mirren, who was rising to prominence in her first ever role, and he said, look out for Helen Mirren.
You're probably a tremendous test taker. That is very well done on, problem-solving skills. I totally understand where you're going there.
I wanted to make like a John Cena joke, but I was like, I don't know when Walt Disney died. And then I was like, all my jokes went to the wife's side.
Yeah, a long time ago. So you were correct, yeah.
Makes it funnier, in my opinion.
I'll start with the one that no one picked, so everyone assumes it's true. And it is. She once thought she had been discovered by a talent scout who'd set her up on an audition. When she arrived to the audition, she quickly realized it was actually a pimp who'd set her up with a paying celebrity client who she recognized. That's true. So she was trained in ballet, and when she was 19, she turned that into becoming a go-go dancer, and she was employed at the World's Fair. And she thought, again, it was a talent scout who set her up to meet with, at that time, 55-year-old cartoonist by the name of Al Cap, who famously wrote Little Abner, which was seen like all across the country. And she met him with it in his apartment. She's like, oh, is this an audition? And he was definitely not dressed like it was an audition. She rejected him, and he read her the riot act about how you'll never make it in Hollywood. And boy, was he wrong. I'm happy that she told that story because she hits it big not too much longer. So that was pretty much the end of Al Cap being very well respected because she told that story the moment she got the opportunity to.
I love that.
Here we go. Fact number 2. Had the police called on her when she broke into a home she had just purchased because she didn't have the keys on her and the neighbors thought she was being robbed? That is true, but also Case is correct. After dancing the night away on her first date with her future boyfriend of 42 years, they both agreed that they didn't want the night to end, and Hawn had recently just purchased this house. She was remodeling, so it was completely empty. Her and Russell go back to their place. She doesn't have the keys on her because why would she bring those keys with her out? So she's like, oh, we'll just climb through the window. Neighbors see this, find that incredibly odd. They call the police. It's not weird to say now. They've been together for that long and they have a few kids together. But the police walked in on them having sex. And she was like, I own this place. Like, it's not a big deal. Like, I'm so sorry. Yeah. And so great first experience for them, which is funny because they seem like they still kind of have that humor about them today. And fact number 1, her name was found to be the last written words of Walt Disney on his desk the day before he died. So she had actually worked with Walt Disney right around the time of his death. But this fact isn't about her. It is, again, about her coworker at the time and the future star of Fast and Furious 7, famously playing Mr. Nobody. Again, also her boyfriend of the last 40-plus years, Kurt Russell. Walt Disney was a famous workaholic, and he was still working up until the day he died, even though he had been diagnosed with terminal cancer. And when they cleared off his desk after he had passed away, and a 16-year-old at the time who he thought would be great for it by the name of Kurt Russell's name was underlined and spelled incorrectly. He spelled the name Kurt incorrectly, but the last written word of Walt Disney was Kurt Russell.
Boy, we were dancing around that one all the whole time.
You guys were right on it for sure.
With misspellings and
Oh yeah,
Kurt Russell and ages. That's great. And I know we're talking about Goldie Hawn tonight, but most people don't realize Kurt Russell is a child actor.
So they had worked together when he was like 16 and she's like 5 or 6 years older. But like she didn't realize until they started dating many years later. She's like, oh yeah, I did work with you when you were a child actor and I was like newly into the business.
Maybe the cops reminded them when they busted in on them having sex.
They're like clear as day, like two hippies that just clearly dig each other.
I get it. You're appealing to Case's heart, his pitter-patter with that choice, James. And 2, I'm proud of my research. I was on the trail. If I had some more time, I might have got it. That is, I'm keeping my Kurt Russell mention counter for Case, and we're at 1. 2. Okay, if you have bets, can side text me.
Gonna be a lot.
Okay. Thanks, James. Always pleasure. All right, Case, what do we got for Snapshot and box office?
I'm sorry, were you talking to me?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't hear B-Boy.
B-Boy Case. I hate you so much.
Back-to-back episodes, we've got another performer that doesn't do great in the metrics that we use. To my knowledge, the first blockbuster movie of all time was Jaws. That kind of opened the door for what some ambitious filmmakers wanted to start doing. And she was on the front end of that with her career. She was just kind of ahead of her time in terms of box office performance and being in those roles. She doesn't have a lot of indie projects that have complete box office information. And I don't necessarily agree with the numbers, but back-to-back episodes, I have to put them out there, and then we got to discuss them. The important numbers for us to talk about are she's 90th in average budget with a $25.2 million average. Total box office is just over $1 billion, which puts her at 98th. Star meter is 1,796, which ranks her 73rd. Critic ranking, she's 50th at a 56%. This one hurts because she's got a fan ranking of 49%. And does anybody want to take a guess where that ranks?
103.
106th.
Oh boy.
Not ideal.
Really?
That's shocking.
106 out of 106. The notable films that I have, her best performing role is a $4 million budget with a $49 million world gross for the film Shampoo, which actually is the 18th best return on investment from our movies list. Worst performing film on return of investment is Town and Country with over a $100 million budget and just a $10 million world gross, which is actually, it's the third worst movie for losing money on the list that we have. It is in rare company, and it is just behind Mars Needs Moms, which lost $111 million, Moonfall, which lost $106 million, but it did edge out Pluto Nash, which lost $92.9 million. So Town and Country is in dubious company. You put all those numbers together, she ranks 60th out of 106.
60th.
Far lower than I like to report.
Yeah.
But like I said last time, I'm firm but fair.
Lower than I thought it would be. But she has a lot of really bad movies there with Warren Beatty, Chevy Chase, Steve Martin. They're all pretty awful.
Yeah.
What was the movie you think's awful there, Kyle? From Steve Martin.
The Out of Towners.
Oh, okay, I didn't see that one. I was about to say wrong, but I didn't see that one.
I want to pull Rigby. That movie sucks.
She finishes just ahead of Laura Linney. This is a head scratcher. Just behind Sean William Scott.
When you think of Hollywood royalty, those are the ones that
I don't know. This is a tough one to place because, like, she's clearly like a legit movie star, but of a time in which like the box office metrics are going to be odd.
Mm-hmm.
It's an era that's gone, and she's not still doing a ton of active stuff. So it's not like she's cashing in on all of the great work that she did before. The work that she's done, if you've seen the work, it makes sense and almost feels high, like she should be further like down the list. But if you haven't seen the work, this would, I imagine, would be shocking that she would be 60.
A perfect example on what you're talking about, Aubrey, is the movie Dollars. I guarantee you that was a 1970 movie that was intended to be like a big box office movie. And in the 70s and 80s, most studios would occasionally just make these like, we don't care how much money it makes, we're going to make a masterpiece. And studios don't do that anymore.
Also, rom-coms in general aren't huge money makers.
Yeah.
Word of mouth type of genre that gets going. It's not a opening day massive box office.
Going out to see one isn't really urgent because you can just watch one at home.
Stream it.
Yeah.
Which subsequently killed the genre, by the way.
Here's some data to kind of show you guys what I mean about how she was kind of stuck between these two eras in Hollywood. First movie I have her listed for is 1969. It's not until Death Becomes Her in 1992 where she has budget that we would compare to other performers like of modern times. And that was a $55 million budget. That's her first budget over $25 million was in 1992, 23 years into her career.
I wonder how much of that is a choice, though. Like, she could have hopped on a franchise in the 80s.
I agree.
And that would have completely changed this.
Yep.
Like, I wonder what is actually the cause of this. I mean, her choices do appear to be a little bit all over the place, but not from like a big time movie or a franchise movie. Mm-hmm. It seems like clear that she wasn't either offered or interested, which I can't believe she wasn't offered.
Let's test the theory. We started with 60 out of 106.
Yes, sir.
Always interested to see how that lines up. Okay, thanks, Case.
Yeah, man.
All right, first major role. Case talked about it earlier. She does big things in her first film in 1969. So we're going to talk about everything pre-1969. So first and foremost, born in Washington, D.C., 1945. At 3, she started ballet and tap lessons. She was a dancer early on. She had her stage debut in Romeo and Juliet in 1964, so when she was 19 years old. And then she enrolled and dropped from American University. And during that time, she ran and taught in a ballet school, leading eventually to her pro dancing debut in Can-Can at New York's World's Fair in 1964. She's a dancer.
I'm just laughing about the fact 3.
Yeah.
She got connected to some Hollywood dude through a pimp.
It's funny because like that only happens if the persona that she gives off is like somewhat true in her movies, where it's like bubbly and a little ignorant of her surroundings and like not to realize like not everyone's looking out for your best interests. And she's like, oh, cool. Yeah, I'll go to this audition. Be like, do you even know that man's name who just told you about this? What do you think happened right now?
But yeah, early on when she wasn't hanging out with pimps, She was doing a lot of dancing. She was a go-go dancer in New York City. But by 1966, she had moved to California to dance at the Melodyland Theater. So that was when she was 21 years old. Her first role on television was in a recurring role on Good Morning World. She played Sandy, 20 episodes of that from 67 to 68. Not hard to guess because there's a theme early on in her career leading all the way up to Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In. She played the dumb blonde personality, and she fully leaned into it early in her career before she hit the film screen.
This is the oldest role that I can remember her from. She is a perfect cast for this show. For those that don't know about Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In, it was really kind of a very hippie version of Saturday Night Live. It provided like Daily Show level of like social commentary and humor, and it had skits like Saturday Night Live. From what I remember, and I watched about 4 or 5 episodes in preparation for this, but every episode starts with what they call a cocktail party. One shot like cocktail party where they go and talk to different people, and these people are making jokes about current events. She was phenomenal in this, and I remember George Slaughter telling a story on how they loved her like authentic impromptu laughter, so they would intentionally try to screw her up with the script or with the teleprompters or whatever and just make her start laughing. Jimmy Fallon is probably paying homage to her every time he breaks character and starts laughing. Like everybody loved it that much. It was really fun show and great. She played great characters in there.
Yeah, she was on that show for 59 episodes and also got 2 Emmy noms for her role.
Yeah, that was wild to read that. I didn't know that.
But when you say that they walked through like a cocktail party and talked to people, is it like in Maisel?
It very well could be because the 2 hosts, Rowan and Martin, do that. Pretty cool concept. If you have never seen it, I know there's YouTube montages of cocktail parties that you can just go and watch.
Yeah, I watched kind of a compilation of her character throughout the years, and it's exactly like you say. She's like ditzy blonde, fully leans into it. Great experiences where she gets to just light up the screen. Her charisma is fully on display.
One of their recurring bits is the joke wall. And what characters do is they just pop open the door and then they tell a joke. Everybody is really funny and it's really fun to watch. It's something about Goldie Hawn. When she pops that door open and you see her, before she even says anything, you're like, oh, I'm going to like this. Like she just has a charisma and an enthusiasm that's infectious that comes off of the screen like very few performers have.
And let's call a spade here. It's the late 60s. It's television, early in its infancy. There's not much to watch, and people are watching similar things. She's cute as a button.
Yep. She's
an attractive blonde. Like, she got to stand out for all of the good and bad reasons on that show.
Yep.
So it's not a shock that, she was given the platform that not many women were getting at that time, and she took full advantage of it to create a name for herself.
This show is very counterculture and leaned into the hippie movement hardcore. And I think about half the cast was females.
Other than obviously what you've just shared, because you've actually mentioned it before, Case, was that it was the answer to the first $1 million question on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire was what future president had appeared on the show Laugh-In.
Yep.
And the guy was so confident in his answer that he used...
That's right.
He used his final lifeline to call his dad and tell him that he was going to win $1 million and got it right. He's like, yeah, because he's seen the show, and I had never even heard of it. I was like, the most baller shit I've ever seen on a TV show before. It's just unbelievable.
I don't need your help. I just want to let you know I'm about to win the $1 million.
Yeah, I'm about to win $1 million, Dad. Yeah.
Which is wild because it was Nixon, right?
It was Nixon, yeah.
Yep.
Nixon couldn't be further away from the style of this show, but he was friendly with one of the writers.
We would be remiss if we skipped one little nugget tying to her personal life and the connection with Kurt Russell. Case, have you heard of him? Do you know about him?
No comment. If you said B-Boy Case, I might answer appropriately, but I'm going to say no comment.
I'm sure B-Boy Case would be well aware of the fact that she met Kurt on the set of the one and only genuine original Family Band. She played Giggly Girl in 1968. They didn't start dating then, but that's when they first met. They rekindled many years later, but that was the start of their story in 1968.
It's got to be so odd because they both reference it where like, yeah, I mean, we work together, but like you're in different worlds at those ages.
Mm-hmm.
What is it? 10, 12 years later?
12 years later, yeah.
Yeah. Like, oh shit, that's right. You were there. That's crazy.
We crossed paths. He just remembers her,
Yeah.
Right. So first major role is going to be 1969, a role that We don't see this very often. Out of the gate, this woman shows up as Tony in Cactus Flower, wins an Oscar and a Golden Globe in her first ever film role, and a BAFTA nom, and James gets this review.
Cactus Flower has a 85% critic score, 81% audience score. Came out in 1969. Let me tell you, off the jump, as I had said prior, this range of movies for me are really hit or miss. Like, I'll watch the classics because people have told me that they're classics, and I will be impressed when I see them because a lot of them still hold up. But when it's a movie that I hadn't heard of before, I usually go in pretty tentatively. My ADD just can't wait for the slow pacing because that seems to be very common around this era. So I was a little hesitant when I was watching this, but the plot is kind of ahead of its time at the moment. Distraught when her middle-aged lover, so Goldie Hawn plays a woman by the name of Tony Simmons. She's really young, and she's dating this married man, and he breaks a date with her and is trying to distance himself, and she attempts suicide, and they play that off like it's the funniest thing ever. So she tries to leave the oven on and call it a day because this old man played by Walter Matthau won't go on a date with her. And I just couldn't get over that initial fact where it's this absolutely stunningly beautiful woman is about to end it because of Walter Matthau. I couldn't wrap my head around it. The movie kind of throws you for a loop because it starts there, but it's actually fascinating because that's not at all what the plot is. That's how they introduce the movie. She is my lover, but I'm married with 3 children, and I don't want this woman to hurt herself. But the problem is him being married with 3 children is just something he says, and it's not actually true. He just says that to women he dates because he wants to be a single player and doesn't want to commit himself. Walter Matthau. When I saw that, I was like, what the hell is going on? Because that is actually a pretty interesting story to tell, especially for this time period. When he sees this, he's actually impressed by her attempt for suicide. And he's like, you know what? I even like this girl. What am I doing? She almost killed herself. Why would I let that happen? I actually do enjoy hanging out with her. So now he's got to figure out a way to pull off this lie because she's shown she's willing to take these crazy actions. And so he's like, all right, I have to pretend that I'm married and I have 3 kids. So he gets his coworker, Stephanie, who's played by Ingrid Bergman, who's secretly been about him for years, to pretend to be his wife and then pretend to find out about his affair and demand a divorce. It has twists and turns, but it is a comedy. That is what they are going for. I think Hawn in this is absolutely charming. I think that she comes across very naive and matter of fact, but also incredibly earnest. And I think it's her chemistry with the rest of the cast that kind of let this movie work, in my opinion, because I did find it's a movie that's based off of a play, and a lot of movies that I've covered that are from plays, a little too slow paced for me. And I just couldn't get over Matthau being the sex appeal that all these women are fighting over. I couldn't wrap my head around it. Thanks to Hawn's kookiness and her just beaming personality and positivity. It's got some cute parts. It's watchable, even though it's got all those 1969 trappings. It still has an incredibly contemporary feel. I just don't like it as much as everyone else had. I probably have it closer to a 60-ish where it's passable, but I'm not in the 80s. But I could see how people saw this and then saw, oh, wow, she's a star. For 21 in that role with those mainstays in Hollywood, she's absolutely carrying the scenes that she is in.
Like the concept of the film, didn't love the execution of the film. That was my take on Cactus Flower.
100%.
I just said buying Walter Matthau as kind of a swooner in that type of role, it was a hard logical jump for me.
Oh, so you were on the same page as me. You're wait, hold on.
I'm this dude is nowhere near as charismatic and captivating as the screenwriter is trying to make me believe he is. But maybe it's just a product of the times. Maybe Matthau was a Sex Pistol back in the day, and I just don't get it.
Late 60s, early 70s, he was one of the major leading men in Hollywood.
It feels outlandish because it's Walter Matthau. But we've seen worse in movies, or at least equivalent in movies. Yeah. So while it's odd, and I think what makes it so jarringly odd is that Goldie Hawn looks amazing.
It's she's a stunner.
Makes it really odd because of that. I love this movie. I think the beginning is a complete mess and is largely unnecessary.
Yeah.
I think the only real function for the beginning is to introduce the neighbor, Igor.
Yeah.
And introduce him as the eventual love interest. That's a really elaborate setup for something you could have just had them walk past each other in the stairs or something, or help her carry something to her apartment. But after that, once you get to them actually conversing, I think this movie takes off and it's a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. I think Ingrid Bergman doing something like this is also amazing.
She was my favorite part of the movie.
I thought she was great. I just thought that for how well she played the straight-laced woman, I felt like it was just like, oh, okay, click, done, over. I'm like, well, that felt fast.
Mm-hmm.
That felt quick, you know?
But as you guys are talking about this, it also feels like Butterflies Are Free that is coming up.
Yeah.
So I'm watching this and I'm like 35 minutes in, and Emily turns to me and goes, this is basically Just Go With It. And I'm like, what? Like, excuse me? And I looked it up. This is the exact movie that Just Go With It is. Just Go With It is a remake of this movie.
Yes, go with that is the exact plot. She is correct. Yes. It's the whole plot.
Shout out to Emily.
She nailed it. Yeah, for sure.
Do you guys know which other Munson won an Oscar the same year, just in a different category? Actress, best actress.
Iggy Azalea?
Not Iggy Azalea. Great film.
Oh,
The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie. Yep, Maggie Smith. Great film. She's
Yep.
phenomenal in that.
well, she's phenomenal in everything.
I think this is a fun movie. I do, however, quibble a bit with her winning an Oscar here.
I agree wholeheartedly.
I don't think she gives the best performance in this movie. I think Ingrid Bergman gives the best performance. I think she's more of a presence than she is like performing in that way. However, she kind of steals the scenes that she's in because she is just so magnetic. So it's one of those where it's like, I mean, if you're giving it to her for presence, then okay, fine. I'd also have to see who else is getting nominated for stuff at that time. But I was just a little shocked that this was the one that she got it for.
So she was also shocked that she won
She wasn't even there.
because she didn't even show up.
No.
Oh, man.
She's like, I never got dressed. I never picked up the award. I completely regret it. She's like, I look back and now and think how awesome it would have been. Like, Fred Astaire is the one who announced it. And she's like, and he's like my idol as a dancer. She's like, it would have been great. But like, I forgot it was even on TV. And I woke up at like 4 a.m. to someone calling me and be like, hey, you won an Academy Award. And she's like, what? Like, what happened? Like, she didn't even go or pay attention. She didn't think this was happening.
Nominees were Catherine Burns for Last Summer, Diane Cannon for Bob and Carol and Ted and Alice, Sylvia Miles for Midnight Cowboy, Susanna York for They Shoot Horses, Don't They? Like I felt like she was always at 100 in the role, but I wasn't terribly impressed with her. I was impressed for her for like first major role, but not winning an Oscar out of the gate. I was like, nothing about it said Oscar winning performance.
Yeah, I agree with that.
The late 60s were crazy.
We do have to put it in context too. Like, we've seen this character a lot since her. She was doing stuff no one had seen before.
That's true.
Very good point, Case.
That's a good point.
It's now looked at as like a trope.
Yeah.
But that means it had to start somewhere. And it's probably fair to say, she is someone who ushered that in.
Great point. And the Academy's not afraid of crowning a debutante.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
So it makes a little bit of sense there, too.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Still, I think it's a great performance.
Yeah.
It shows her star power.
Yes.
I mean, the fact she wasn't even there tells me she wasn't campaigning for it. So it's not like
No.
You know what I mean? She wasn't seeking it.
Also tells me that she's like an incredibly relatable 21-year-old where you're like,
yeah,
what? You think I'm going to that old person award show? I don't even have a shot to win. Like, why would I go there?
She was 25, by the way.
There you go, yeah.
25, 26.
She probably had some fun hippie shit to be taking a part of it.
Yeah, I gotta go hang out with cool people. I'm not going there.
Okay, cool. Great start. Hey, come out of the gate with an Oscar. Not bad. About 7 years before our next review, the big piece there is she married Gus T. Beat Boy Case can tell me if he knows how to pronounce his last name, but they married in 69. They were married until 76. He was a dancer and was also a shark in West Side Story. I think that's what he's best known for.
Any Mediterranean man could play any race in movies, which was awesome.
Yeah.
It's like, just get his hair cut the right way, and all of a sudden that man is actually from Puerto Rico. And like, no, he's not. That's a Greek man.
Her largest critic gap is a movie called Dollar. She played Dawn Divine in 1971, and Aubrey and Case are going to co-tackle this one.
Dollar Sign is really the title of the movie.
Yeah.
Which is dollars. It's very weird if you're trying to look for this. But it's really just about a bank security expert and a call girl plotting to rob 3 safety deposit boxes of like about $1.5 million that belong to different criminals. Goldie Hawn is your call girl. Warren Beatty is your bank security expert. Everything on the periphery of this is very intriguing. It kind of gets lost in itself. And so you have a movie that's very like methodically paced. It's a bit convoluted. What's happening and how it's happening and like how everything is going about getting done. It just doesn't really come together. Which kind of sucks because the first 15 or 20 minutes you're engaged in something because you don't see heist movies like this. This is a straight up and down heist movie and you don't see heist movies like so that part wears off, and when that wears off it just doesn't have anything behind it to kind of hold it up, which becomes really disappointing. Goldie Hawn is playing a character kind of much like you would expect based off of how we've described her career up until this point. She's a call girl, she's a bit ditzy, she leans into that, big personality, a lot of energy, a lot of weird, strange cutaway sequences to her watching television and meditating and things like that, which are just odd. It feels like they brought her in and were like, hey, we're going to point the camera at you, be funny or do something interesting. It just doesn't come together. My biggest takeaway with this movie is heist movies are engaging. Heist movies are exciting. Heist movies are thrilling. Dollars is more interested in how a heist could work effectively than it is making it thrilling.
86-49 was the split. It's pretty large.
Yeah, I think critics loved this because I think it building on what the Italian Job started in '69 of an international heist and bank robberies. But this one was doing it with a little bit of a comic flair. And Warren Beatty was top of his game at this point, and it might have been one of the first comedic roles that he had. I don't know his career well enough, but I do know there's some parallels with the Italian Job from '69. This movie has arguably the longest chase scene that I've ever sat through in one sitting. And I mean that both from duration and geographically. Like this chase scene starts out in the sewers and it ends on a frozen lake in the countryside somewhere. And it goes through famous tunnels and all this other stuff. It's wild and it's pretty entertaining. And critics gave this movie a pass for...
I don't want this to sound too aggressive, but the Italian Job was exciting.
Oh yeah.
Thrilling.
Masterpiece.
And this movie takes all of that out in its heist. Its heist is clever.
Yeah, and it changes to comedy. Action comedy version of the action suspense of the Italian Job. 100% agree, Aubrey.
I don't call movies boring, and I try not to knock them for methodical pacing, which is why I try to use that terminology the way that I do. But this movie is slow, taking its time setting up the pieces, which I imagine if you buy in works really well. Because it seems like a movie that is organized very well around really good ideas. It's well shot. It's well acted.
Yep.
There's nothing bad here, so I know it's not dumb.
The first of, I think, 3 roles with Warren Beatty. The third, I think, being Town and Country. That was the largest critic gap. We've got 12 years until our next review. And this is where her career just gets very busy very quickly with some pretty cool roles. First and foremost, Butterflies Are Free, 1972. She got a Golden Globe nom for her role as Jill, a movie that if you're a fan of dramatic theater, you're kind of in for a treat.
Yeah.
If you don't like theater, this is not. I'm going to take that back. I'm not even a huge theater person, but I enjoyed Butterflies Are Free. This was the first movie I watched for research. I was more intrigued by what Edward Albert was doing than her.
Yeah.
Him and his mother were the 2 characters I found most captivating.
So the things I've paid attention to the most in preparation for this podcast is her work in the 60s and 70s, because I didn't know anything about her in that era aside from Rowan and Martin. And this was one of the first things I watched. And 2 things came about on this. It was incredibly well written. The dialogue on this, it's just so good. I was really impressed by her ability to go back and forth on her quirky, bubbly personality with then some let's tone it down for a second and let's be like a serious person and carry this role a little bit better. So I was really impressed with that. But overall, that story was so well written, and I turned on and I was going to spend 20 minutes watching it, and I watched the whole thing, start to finish.
Her character is diabolical too. What an asshole.
She's loony.
Poor guy.
I mean, good grief.
I mean, she's just a young girl who, he gets excited. Next thing you know, she's bringing another guy from the acting world to his apartment.
The mom drove me crazy, and I'm like, just get this lady off the screen. And then it turns out she was right. And That's how well written it was. It was a great watch.
Yeah. It invests you in the characters pretty early on. Aubrey, you should watch it. I think you would enjoy it.
There's 2 movies I missed on this one that I really wish I would have seen. This was one of them. This was like number 2 on my list of if I was able to have more time, I would have seen this one.
Town and Country's the other?
Not at all.
A movie we covered on the William Atherton episode, I believe we called this his first major role, and that was Sugarland Express. She plays Lou, a role I remember watching when I watched it for Atherton, being super impressed by her and her character. She's at the center of this story, kind of like an on-the-road Thelma and Louise kind of esque story, but not really. Cool concept and a really awesome movie.
What I remember from reviewing this is like the first thing that blew me away is this is Spielberg's first major film. Really well shot. And it's the first movie ever to feature a tracking shot from front seat to the back seat with a 360-degree pan of dialogue within the car. That's an idea he just had and was like, immediately did it, and every other director was like, why didn't I think of that?
Yeah, if I remember the plot correctly, they are traveling, I think, to Texas because they lost their baby to the state of Texas, and so they basically go on the run to try to get their baby back.
Mm-hmm.
And William Atherton, spoiler, gets real murdered by the end. Poor guy.
Based on a true story.
Breaks him out of jail, doesn't it?
She breaks him out of jail early in the film. They go on the run, and it's like a huge, high-profile true story.
They kidnapped a state trooper.
Mm-hmm. This movie is awesome. This is one of those that, like, stop the podcast, make a note in your phone, you have to watch this movie type thing. She's extraordinary in this. First thing I thought of when I saw this, because I didn't have time to come back to this one, I also feel like I didn't need to, because as soon as I saw that we were doing this, it's just like, oh, yeah, Sugarland Express, she takes that movie over just with sheer charisma.
What is so baffling about it too is she gets award noms for so many movies in the 70s, and this is the one she didn't get anything for. And I honestly think this was my favorite role of hers from this time, of the ones I've seen.
I think this is her best performance.
I know.
She's got a lot to do. She's also at this point what has been placed on her with the choices that she's had up until this point.
Yep.
Because there's a lot of charm and a lot of charisma in this role. And I would say maybe on its face, it doesn't seem that different, but she brings a lot to it that's different than just the typical dumb kind of beautiful person.
I was just curious looking at the Academy Awards that year. Like, this is a tough year to compete. It was Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, Chinatown, Murder on the Orient Express, Blazing Saddles, Godfather Part 2. Like, this is just a tough year to compete for awards, unfortunately.
It's also how a movie like this gets forgotten in Spielberg.
Yeah.
Yep.
With Spielberg being who he is, that's the only reason why this movie can be forgotten.
Loaded year.
I think she needed to work with more directors at the level of Spielberg that weren't going to take the low-hanging fruit of using her bubbly personality. But it is clearly obvious that she's turning in a performance here that I don't think we've seen before or since. And I wish she would have worked with some filmmakers that would have taken her to another place, because I think she'd have got there.
Yeah, it's hard to argue that with this on her resume.
Mm-hmm.
How about Shampoo, 1975? She played Jill, another Golden Globe nom. I've never seen it. Anybody watch it?
Yeah, this was the other movie on my list. This was the number one I wanted to get to that I didn't.
I know it did well in the box office. $4 million budget, 49 million world gross.
Damn.
That's very good. That is very good.
It's in the Criterion collection, whatever that means to people.
Another Warren Beatty movie.
One thing I wanted to mention about Shampoo is when you search for her on IMDb, one of the things that it says frequently searched for is a person named Anthea Silbert, who passed away in 2024. But the two of them had what appears to be a pretty prolific partnership. And in some form or fashion, they collaborated on 8 different movies following Shampoo. And they were Overboard, Shampoo, My Blue Heaven, Something to Talk About, Wildcats, Crisscross, Protocol, and Hope. Some of these are producing credits, but what's interesting is Anthea Silbert started out as a costume designer and then through different things worked her way into some producing roles with Goldie Hawn. And I think that's a really cool off-the-screen connection to make for Goldie Hawn.
The Duchess in the Dirtwater Fox. She played Amanda / Duchess Swansbury, another Golden Globe nom from 1976. I didn't catch this one either.
I was an infant in diapers, so I didn't see this one either. I was born in 76.
You should have developed some higher brain functioning and you could have been helpful for us tonight.
Yes.
Well, she got married for a second time in 1976. This time she married Bill Hudson. They were married until 1982 and had 2 children together.
You might have heard of one of them.
Yeah.
Kate?
That would be the one, yes.
Which one of her kids is more popular these days, Kate or Wyatt?
I think Wyatt's acting more.
Wyatt, right? Yeah. But like Kate's got to have more pop culture.
Like it depends who you're asking.
Yeah, I think the pop culture impact is Kate.
1978, Foul Play. She played Gloria, another Golden Globe nom. She's just stacking GG noms in the 70s at this point. It's almost like a prerequisite, but this is alongside Chevy Chase, kind of a goofy cop thriller.
The stacking of Golden Globe knobs makes complete sense to me. She is 100% someone that I would imagine would just have a ton of Golden Globe nominations.
Very popular.
Mm-hmm.
Her character essentially gets caught in the middle of an assassination plot. A guy at the start of the movie basically gives her a pack of cigarettes with something in it, and he turns out to get murdered in a movie theater, almost Scream 2 style. And then she just spends the rest of the movie trying to figure out what the hell is going on, and she's right at the center of it. So the film revolves around her. Chevy Chase plays one of the detectives who's running it down. One of the better Chevy Chase movies she's in. It's got good reviews. It's not bad. It's available for free on YouTube here in the States.
Is she back to her like bubbly, ditzy blonde?
She's caught very unaware as to what's going on, so it's very much typecast.
I think she's locked into that for the foreseeable future.
Well, 1980 hits, and she plays Private Benjamin in Private Benjamin, a film she also helped produce. She got Oscar and Golden Globe noms for Best Actress in this role, about a woman who is not really fit to be in the military, but now she's trying to figure out how to be a soldier.
This movie is really good.
Thoroughly enjoyable. Completely absurd, but thoroughly enjoyable.
Absolutely absurd. That's the kind of stuff that I feel like she does really well in.
Yeah.
Put this really charismatic person in, a really interesting, absurd, but interesting situation, and let's just kind of see what happens around it.
It predates Stripes. It felt like the female version of Stripes.
Yep.
Stripes came out a year later.
She's an executive producer on this. Either they or she, I don't know, is beginning to insert her as like the female comedic actor. Like you said, Stripes, I would be willing to bet they were probably greenlit around the same time. And this may just have been produced faster.
Mm-hmm.
For somebody's first executive producer credit to be a $9.5 million budget and world gross $70 million, I mean, come on. You're onto something. And she may very well have said, you know what people love from me? They love for me to be the bubbly, giggly, fresh, fish out of water, fun person. And then she went, sign me up. Let's make a bunch of money.
And got an Oscar nomination for a comedic role.
Yes.
That's 2 Oscar noms for comedic roles.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
This is the role that she's like most known for, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think it's number 1 on IMDb.
I think for 90 minutes, the movie is excellent. The last third of this movie is just rough. For the last, it drags on way past where it should go. And almost betrays a lot of the stuff that it does before that. But the first 90 minutes are so good, I don't even really care.
Fun. Yeah.
Like just seeing her do the army stuff, seeing her like figure that point out, and seeing her be able to land the dramatic part of that.
Mm-hmm.
As absurd as the situation that she is in is, at some point in time, she's got to deal with the trauma of what happened. Because like what happened to her is outrageous.
Awful.
You don't have to play it like super straight, but at some point in time, you got to touch on that and be like, hey, this is why I'm doing this crazy thing that none of you guys think makes any sense, because it doesn't make any sense, because I have no idea what I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
Because I'm living through this insane trauma. And she's able to land that plane with some level of grace. Like, it works.
That scene when she's like totally fed up with it. She's been out in the rain with her unit because she's fucking up, and her parents show up ready to whisk her away. For what is a pretty comedic plot at that point in time, there's a pause there, and she commands some dramatic presence to be like, nah, I'm good. For me, that's kind of what sold the rest of the movie for me. I was like, okay, they're actually taking this character's plight seriously. It's not just a bunch of bits. My parents are overbearing, not people who are looking out for my best interests. They just want to protect me from the world, and I need to lean into this.
And for a 80s comedy film with some pretty notable names, the fact that everybody associates her with this and this with her is great.
Best Friends, 1982, another Golden Globe nom, this time alongside Bert. I didn't watch Best Friends, but again, another Golden Globe. She's not winning any of the Golden Globes, but she's getting nominated. She won 1, and that was her first one.
It's staggering how easily her charismatic energy comes off of the screen, and it just doesn't stop. It's wild.
Highest critic score is a movie called Swing Shift. We just referenced it on the Stephen Tobolowsky episode from 1984. She plays a character named Kay. Didn't watch it for that, caught it for this. Even though it is highest critic score, it's also a big critic gap movie. An 87-42 split, which is pretty rare. Rarely do we find highest critic scores also essentially largest critic gap. So that made it intriguing on the front end because the audiences are not a huge fan of this. Critics love it. It's directed by Jonathan Demme. If you don't know him, he did Silence of the Lambs, Philadelphia, Rachel Got Married, a movie we talked about not too long ago that people really like. Her fellow Munsons, Holly Hunter and Stephen Tobolowsky, and actors like Fred Ward, Ed Harris, Kurt Russell, and the Woman of the Hour, Goldie Hawn. It's an important film for a couple of reasons. One, because Goldie and Kurt started their romance while on set. You know, they had met back in 68. So 15 years later, they're back on a movie set together. They met when they were 21 and 16, respectively. So just like in a different time. So 15 years later, when they're 36 and 31, you know, it kind of hits a little bit differently. I guess Kurt hit on her at auditions. Basically, he told her she had a really great figure. That's where it started commenting how great her body looked in auditions, and I guess that was exactly what he needed to get in the door.
And it would eventually lead to a potential B&E call, breaking and entering call to the Los Angeles Police Department.
It also led to, in this movie, her returning the favor by putting a drill straight into his back on the factory floor. That's how they met in the film. Takes a drill about 1.5 feet long and shoves it straight into his back.
That would kill most men.
Yeah, the fact that he wasn't bleeding from the back was quite a moment.
I respect when couples are honest about how they felt about one another. A lot of times people feel the need to sell some sort of like fairy tale love story to their friends, let alone celebrities who have to sell it to the public. I appreciate when people are like, yeah, listen, man, like I thought she was like the hottest woman I've ever seen in my life. It's like, I don't know what to say, you know, like it's like, and she was into me. I was like, damn. I'm really lucky, you know, like this is awesome. It's way more refreshing to hear that than someone who's like, well, you know, love at first sight. Is like, well, that is your story, of course, but it sounds made up.
And he's like, no, she was fire. I threw some lines at her. It worked out.
Yeah, the moment I saw her, I was like, holy hell, she's gorgeous.
She had married twice by then. And my understanding, they're like, yeah, it just never made sense for us. We just do our thing.
Yeah, they've raised like a ton of kids together. You know, it's 40 plus years now. So it clearly works for them.
I said, let's not get the government involved.
Well, it doesn't hurt that he is like hitting his early groove in Hollywood, coming off of Used Cars, Escape from New York, The Thing. Like, he's the shit at this point. So,
Of course.
he had it working too. So the two of them were meant to be.
Oh, yeah. Two people just on an absolute tear in Hollywood at this moment in time. So not a shock at all. So, and she had just gotten divorced, a year before that. So fresh off that whole situation. But anyways, I really haven't talked about the movie at all. Just kind of talked about her and Kurt. But the plot of the film is basically, what if Rosie the Riveter fell in love with another man while her husband is away at war? That's essentially what Swing Shift is. Well, Holly Hunter plays a fellow Rosie the Riveter who loses her husband to the war. You get to see some great dramatic chops from Holly Hunter very early in her career. Super impressed by that. Tobo also appears in the same scene where she's having her breakdown. And he's also the narrator of the Rosie the Riveter instructional videos for the staff. I'm going to be honest, this movie bored the shit out of me. Even though it's the highest critic score, I'm treating it like a critic gap. And I'm way on the audience side. I didn't love this movie. It was boring, kind of predictable. Ed Harris comes back, finds out, you know, she's fucking around with Kurt Russell. He hadn't been gone that long. He just was lonely. You know, I found it more interesting for the off-the-screen stuff, less about what was going on the actual screen. I think there are way more films on her filmography that are worthy of highest critic score. This felt like a little bit of an anomaly. It makes sense. The beats were super predictable in this, so as long as you read a plot synopsis, you're like, got it, understood. You know, she's not taking side roles at this point. It's all feature leads. Okay, 1986. Although it wasn't a featured review, it's the movie I'm most excited to hear you all talk about, and that is the film that I couldn't stop texting the group chat about over the weekend, and that is Wildcats. She plays Molly, the woman who really wants to coach the high school JV team where she's at. They won't let her, so they kick her over to the inner city school to become the varsity coach for a team that is really, really bad at football. And you get to see Wesley Snipes' first movie role, Woody Harrelson's first movie role, McKelty Williamson doing his thing. It might have been his first movie role too. I didn't even look at that. But I will never forget my watching Wildcats from 1986. Never.
Really bad football body double for Wesley Snipes.
Woody Harrelson's not a very good quarterback in this movie either.
He also disappears after he gives up with the quarterback.
He pulls a Charlie Conway and gives up his role to Adam Banks. He recognized McKelty's the man.
Except Charlie Conway still had a role. He gives this up, and there's a scene where he's like, I'm a really good running back position that doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
And smash cut to him never playing football again.
He pauses and he says, did I tell you I'm a great H-back? She goes, yeah.
Yeah.
And then it's never again do we see him do anything on the actual football field. This movie rules. It's awesome.
The only parts I don't like about this movie as it relates to her, I thought when she was away from football, dealing with all her family stuff, she would just suddenly become very naive. At what point did she think it was a good idea to have the whole football team over to a party at her house with her children there? It just seemed like they were going, oh yeah, by the way, we have Goldie Hawn, so we have to do this.
What probably made her think that was the fact that the principal was there.
Yeah.
My teacher and coach friends, if this is a realistic representation of the profession.
That's hilarious. Fair point. Fair point.
Yeah, do you guys have your entire teams over with the principal over to your house to drink and have parties?
I'm at a Catholic school now, no comment.
I coach college athletes, and I've never had them over to have drinks and party.
He was taking the drinks, guys.
She was.
She was being responsible.
Yeah.
Watching older movies from like the 80s or 90s, like when was the last time you guys watched Dangerous Minds? When you watch movies like this, they're amazing for like moral ambiguity. I really feel like it was a different time. Is that what I think high school was really like? No, but no one cared.
Mm-hmm.
So it might have been.
Yeah.
We're gonna have these fully grown adults. Wesley Snipes is a fully grown adult in this movie. Like in Dangerous Minds, the teacher takes one of the kids out for dinner. And it's like, okay. And it's a sweet moment. Like, it's like she's doing a nice thing for him. And it's almost like freeing in a really like simple way of just like, there are no rules here. So now what? Now there's no rules. So what can you do with this movie to make it fun? And this movie is like, there's no rules? Cool. Gratuitous scene of Goldie Hawn naked for no reason. Also, can we talk about how she gets everyone to listen to her? This is how. I'm gonna wrangle up all of these like stragglers. You know what we're gonna do? We're gonna run a mile.
Run them. Yep.
And if you guys can't outrun me in this mile, because you know what teenagers do in their spare time? They run miles.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I loved that scene. They're all falling out. None of them quit like just like I'm done. They all fall out in the worst possible way. It's amazing. I'm not saying this ironically. This movie is amazing.
Oh, it was incredible.
I enjoyed it.
In all the best ways.
I don't love the depiction of inner city school. I don't love that.
No, of course not.
I don't love that. It's a very poor representation of inner city schools.
Yes.
And then that Goldie Hawn comes in to save it is also strange. It reminds me of that Jim Belushi movie.
Wasn't he riding a motorcycle down the hallway?
Yeah. He's like climactic scene of that movie is him like killing a student.
Well, yeah.
Like he's like fighting a student for their lives.
Sometimes you got to take care of business, baby. You just got to do what you got to do.
Send your white women into these schools and let them save all of the poor kids. I love it.
I love the fact you called this a drama. I'm here for that.
I don't know what it is. Go watch Wildcats.
So what I'm taking away from this whole conversation is that Goldie Hawn and the movie Wildcats did it right.
Yeah. Accurate depiction is what I mean.
If she had played this like more straight and serious, it wouldn't work with the tone of the film.
No, it has to be ridiculous.
It has to be absurd.
Support the filmmakers.
That's right.
Support this art. Let them know we need more movies like this.
Yes.
Let's see the 2024 version of Wildcats.
Largest audience gap is Overboard from 1987. She plays Joanna/Annie, and Dan Craig, our Gus Munson, has the review.
Here, as advertised, is my review of the largest audience gap for Miss Goldie Hawn, Overboard. Released in 1987, directed by Gary Marshall, starring Goldie Hawn, Kurt Russell, and Edward Herrmann. Goldie plays a rich, spoiled heiress, Joanna, who falls overboard of her luxurious yacht and is picked up by Kurt Russell as a revenge scam at first because she stiffed him on money that he was owed to redo her closets. He takes her and basically forces her to think that she is his wife and the mother of his 4 children, who are all completely obnoxious and terrifying in very many ways. Hilarity ensues afterward. This has a 46% score on Rotten Tomatoes, a 74% audience score. This is a movie that I feel everyone really, really loves. However, I am really not one of those people. sorry to say. The movie is weird, creepy, and doesn't work on a lot of levels. However, this is about Goldie, so let's keep it on her. She's really charming in it. She's a lot of fun to watch, especially when she is playing the rich heiress. But she actually does some legit parallel characterization when she gets into the role of Annie, the wife that she thinks she is to Kurt Russell. She's several moments that are really awesome, particularly when she goes to the kid's teacher and chews her out for not noticing that they have poison oak and that they need medical attention. She's got some moments where she really does shine in this movie, and I feel like her presence and really Kurt Russell, the two of them work really well together. They really elevate the material to something that's not terrible to watch. Okay? Although I remember watching this probably when it first came out, so I would have been 10 years old, and I remember first watching it thinking it was way more hilarious than it actually is. I really didn't find it was overly funny in many ways, but she is good. She's charming. She's funny. She's doing some interesting things with material that's, really not that great. Roger Ebert, he gives it 3 stars. Right? He was charmed also by it. Yeah, so there we go.
I have more of just a random news. My wife and I have recently started doing kind of a trade-off babysitting with our couple friends, where we'll help put our kid, our daughter, to sleep, and then they'll watch the monitor and hang out in our house while we go out on a date, and we'll do the same for them, and we'll trade. And the band that performs in Overboard while they're at the bar is called the Wright Brothers, and they're from Indianapolis, and they're actually from the town I live in. And my wife and I went out to a bar, and one of the brothers was performing, and I was like, well, what the fuck do you know? What are the chances? It's like, there you go.
That's wild.
That's an incredible coincidence.
Tim Wright of the Wright Brothers, who was in this movie.
I know it's not a well-reviewed movie. This was the big vehicle between the two of them.
I hate this movie. I hate this movie so much. I did not enjoy. I'm trying to think if there was a single moment in which I enjoyed this movie. And I'm not sure that I did. I didn't find it very funny. As we spent, 10 minutes gushing about the moral ambiguity of Wildcats and how great it is, I take the opposite view on this movie. What this movie does is insane to me. Kurt Russell should be imprisoned, his character, for this.
Yeah.
I couldn't get past it. That was the thing that, you guys had Walter Matthau and Cactus Flower. This was my thing I couldn't get past. Every minute, I was just like, dude, you're still trying to convince her to have sex with you with lies? It's insane what he does.
The critics' consensus on Rotten Tomatoes makes me laugh because the movie's called Overboard, and it says Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell's comedic chops elevate waterlogged material, but not even their buoyant chemistry can keep Overboard's creepy concept afloat.
That type of film writing makes me so sad.
Incredible puns.
The reason this movie was made to me is a no-brainer. It's Gary Marshall's directing. The guy's a legend. And they basically said, hey, Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell, how about you guys lean into your favorite characters of all time? And Kurt Russell's going to play that kind of white trash sleazeball that he played in Used Cars. And Goldie Hawn's going to play the bubbly, whatever, and fish out of water type of thing. And I think people were kind of over it by then.
The one thing I will say that I took away seriously from this movie was the two sides of the character that Goldie Hawn had to play. Two very distinguished people.
Yeah.
In a situation like this, it's a hard thing to do that, to make the pre-accident character be one very clear person and then the post-accident character be a totally other person is a tough job. And she's able to pull that off enough to be interesting. So I give credit to that. And that's about it. Case, I hope we'll survive my next comment. And I hope that you remember that I respect and admire and love you. But I found Kurt Russell to be very annoying in this movie.
Oh, yeah. I believe it. I believe it. He's not perfect.
Knew that was coming.
So I was just like, this ain't it for me.
He's not perfect. I believe this is the first time that she worked with Anthea Silbert as a producer. I think this is a really cool relationship that probably most people aren't going to talk about or notice. I think there's some strength to that.
A long time before our last review, and that's first and foremost, she executive produced My Blue Heaven in 1990, act up opposite Steve Martin in 92 in HouseSitter.
I always feel like I need to preface this. There's cultural blackouts for my wife, and it's just randomly pops up I will mention an absolute classic, and she's like, "Oh, like I've heard of it, I've never seen it," and it's one of those ones that like stops you in your tracks, and you're like, "You've never seen this movie? Like the whole world has seen this movie." Where that doesn't ever become the case is any romantic comedy between like 1983 and like 1993, that 10-year frame. Her parents made her watch all of those, and this was one of them. And so the moment I said, I was like, "Oh, we're doing Goldie Hawn," she's like, "Oh, we got to watch HouseSitter. It's a classic." And I was like, "What?" I was like, "What?"
That movie that's like peripheral on the show notes. That one, okay, we'll watch
I
it.
was like, "All right, I'll watch HouseSitter." And hey, it was funny, but it's one of those like
Oh, it's funny.
farce movies that like only could be pulled off by someone like Goldie Hawn and Steve Martin, where it's two charming people and it's so nonsensical that you just like accept the nonsense, and you're like, all right, I'll go on this journey where it's they hook up. It's like a one night stand, and during this one night stand he explains how he has this vacant house like in upstate Connecticut that is just like sitting there, and it's like, and she just like sneaks in and is like, oh cool, I'll just go there and take it. Pretends to be his wife and talks to people in the town and all that stuff, and it's funny and it's charming, and it's just one of those things where it's like she'd most likely be arrested in real life, as we've seen where she was in her own house for like 20 minutes before she got arrested. It's just funny because it's one of those movies that I'd never heard of before, and she's like, oh, you've never seen HouseSitter? Of course we got to watch HouseSitter.
I love the fact that we have just now placed the film HouseSitter into a classic.
Every movie like that where it's like, you're like, is it a classic? It's just a rom-com from that time frame.
3 types of checkpoint films for every episode. It's what was Case's VR watch, what was Aubrey's son's DNF, and then what is the random rom-com that Kate watched that no one should know about. Those are the 3.
Exactly. Like, oh,
The classics.
you've never heard of, insert something that like even that person's family hasn't heard of, and they starred in that movie.
And in Kate's defense, this thing pulled in 95 million world gross. So she's onto something.
Wow, that's actually a lot more than I thought.
Yeah, oh yeah.
That's a ton.
Oh yeah.
A movie that I hadn't seen in many, many moons, but I watched a bunch when I was a kid, and that is 1992's Death Becomes Her. She played Helen, Meryl Streep, her, Bruce Willis. A movie that isn't terribly well rated, but it's just like, I think pop culture-wise, people know about Death Becomes Her. It's a pretty absurd film.
The cover of this movie is something that has stood out in my mind from a young age and going to like Blockbuster and seeing it, because the cover is enticing. She's got a big old hole in her stomach. Meryl Streep's head is twisted on backwards. I was like, this is an intriguing looking movie. And I just never watched it. And I watched it for this. And the way they tell the story is like, I find it unique in that it's clearly trying to say something about like female vanity in Hollywood, right? And how it's not only toxic from the man's side, but it's also toxic from the woman's side. And it's competitive, and it is never ending, never winning battle, right? And it's supposed to be like satire, and I think the acting is good, and I just don't think the movie's that good. Like I think both of the main leads did a lot and were great, actually, and I think the message is good, but I think like Zemeckis kind of gave us like a C+ product, if you will, where I like watched it and I was like, oh, it's just like a little short on laughs, I guess. I don't know. Like it felt like a good idea that just never really came to fruition.
When Zemeckis is good, he's great. When he's not, it's rough.
Yeah.
And this one is more the latter. The first like 15 minutes of this movie is an absolute mess. Like jumps to like different, it's just a mess.
Yeah, you're right. She's like in a fat suit because she's a crazy cat lady. It's like all over the place. Yeah.
It's a mess. And it's all to get to a place that you could have just got to with a little exposition. You could have got there just fine. I didn't need 15 minutes of smash cuts from 7 years later. It's a good idea that I feel like didn't come together. I agree with that 100%, James. It's just Meryl Streep is the GOAT. And it's one of those where I'm getting this more and more as I get older, and the more and more things I watch. You watch people do a thing that's great and it's really hard, and you go, man, they're really great at that thing that's really hard. And then you watch someone who is an alien do it, and you go, oh, that person is doing a completely different thing. It's impossible what they're doing.
Yeah.
And that's what acting is to her. Every time I see her act, I'm like, she's probably the best actor I've ever seen. It's insane how good she is and how she makes this work.
So like that's what like I felt like they were both doing well in their roles, and like, well, why isn't this movie working for me? Because I think it's a funny bit that Bruce Willis dates one of them, and just whatever one is looking more attractive at that moment, he falls for them. I think that's a funny bit. It's a right on the nose male gaze thing. I think he's like, oh, she's looking really hot. I'm kind of into her now. Very funny. And the both women like essentially killing themselves to become more and more attractive. Also very funny. It's just the movie itself just like doesn't really put it all together.
I think it's a mixing of tones that just bother people.
The tone thing, and there's no structure to hold it together.
Yeah. It's a bizarre concept with good actors doing kind of eclectic things.
I have a couple of production notes on this movie I think are interesting. Number one, this film pioneered some CGI effects by Industrial Light and Magic that they would incorporate into Jurassic Park.
Hell yeah.
The special effects are good in this movie for the
Good.
most part.
It's good.
Like,
It doesn't look hokey when she
No.
walks out with a hole in her stomach. Like, it doesn't look bad.
yeah, Meryl Streep's head turns around and it is like an actual scene that you're not like, oh, that aged terribly. You're like, oh, that looks good today. Like,
Speaking of Streep, she said she would never do another film with heavy special effects. Hey, when you're Meryl Streep, you don't need special effects.
I thought Goldie Hawn played the role as written in the script well.
yeah.
So I had no issues with her in this film.
I have a feeling there were script issues with this because it had two different writers on it. One of them, somebody had hardly any credits, and then the next one, like the one after that, had like Jurassic Park and all these other massive films.
I can confirm there was some script issues. I watched it.
Can confirm. She took a couple of years off between 92 and 96. Her mother had cancer, so she was caring for her mom during that time. So it's kind of a little bit of a downtime, obviously taking some time away to handle her personal life. But then she comes back in 96 and does The First Wives Club, a movie that I believe James reviewed on the Dan Hedaya episode.
Mhm.
Maggie Smith is in, but like clearly not Maggie Smith's best role that she's ever played in. Honestly, I wish she was never in this. Not because it's a bad movie, but because her role is just like a nothing burger. She's got some iconic lines in this, Goldie Hawn. Plastic surgery line in particular, I think, is one that sticks around quite a bit with her.
Yeah, this is her highest grossing movie of all time at $181 million worldwide.
She talks about how with this movie at the time, to get all three of the main stars on this movie, they all agreed to take a cut to stay because they wanted to make the movie. And in acting, you essentially get like a rate that once you get to, you don't really negotiate against yourself. And so people know, hey, if I want Goldie Hawn, I have to pay minimum this. All three actresses agreed to take less than what they normally take and even take less on the back end from sales to help production costs. And the movie ended up making so much money that they're like, well, let's make a second one. And she's like, and we came back to the negotiating table to make a second one. And the production company was like, yeah, you guys want to take the same pay cut as last time? And all three were like, no. Like,
Not a chance.
Yeah.
okay, well then we don't think we're gonna make the movie. And she was like, I can't believe like I'm dealing with this like sexist bullshit even after I just made them like $200 million. Like come on. Like what are we doing here?
Yeah.
Oh, it's a freaking bone here.
Yeah, for real.
In the movie I'm going to review, her and Diane Keaton have great chemistry. Is it the same in this movie?
I haven't seen a movie with her where I don't think she has good chemistry. I think that is one of the skill sets she brings to the table is
Okay.
she clearly goes out of her way to find a way to connect with those that she is working with. So she might not have the largest range, but it is clear that she is able to bounce well off of other actors and actresses, which is a skill into itself. Yeah, and I've seen that here as well, because the people that she's acting with are like, Bette Midler is more famous for being a singer, not necessarily an actress. And
Yeah.
Diane Keaton is a legend, but in drastically different films than Goldie Hawn. And so
Yeah.
to see them kind of work with each other is impressive. But I still maintain that I think the reason why this movie is as popular as it was is because this is one of the first times this type of story is being told at a time where divorce is incredibly popular in pop culture.
I just saw Scott Rudin as the producer on this, so your story about them not getting any money to make a sequel makes 100%.
I just didn't enjoy this movie all that much. I think I get it from like why it worked,
Yeah.
why it made so much money. It caught a wave for sure. when you're able to catch an audience that's mostly underserved. It's an era of comedy and a type of comedy that I'm not 100% sure ages well. And so this is the first time I watched it. So it's like,
I was not the target market.
This is like for my mom. Yeah, this is my mom's movie. This is not for me.
my mom loves this movie.
Of course.
Name
Yeah,
checked that when I told her what we were doing.
This movie passed the Bechdel test. I can confirm. After
That's
watching
exactly
it.
all three tests. All three tests.
And Dan Hedaya is exactly what you would expect him to be in that. No surprises there. The last thing we'll mention before our final review of the night is the Out of Towners Steve Martin collab. It's just really bad. It was aggressively boring, and I don't have a whole lot of good things to say about it. It was a remake of a film from many decades ago that I think was received a lot better, and this was an unfortunate remake. But let's talk about a movie that also didn't receive great glowing recommendations from anyone, and that is our lowest critic score, which is the film Town and Country, the one that we've mentioned multiple times, lost a lot of money, and she plays Mona, a role that got her first Razzie nom. By the way, we just passed the millennium. Don't let it be forgotten.
You've turned that into an art form, Kyle.
Thank you. B-Boy Case, tell us.
This is a 2001 romantic comedy by British filmmaker Peter Chelsom. Movie stars Warren Beatty, the aforementioned Diane Keaton, the legend Gary Shandling, and the star of our show, Goldie Hawn. In addition, other notable roles are played by Andy McDowell, Jenna Elfman, Nastasia Kinski, Charlton Heston, and a young Joshua Hartnett.
Mm-hmm.
I found this movie pretty unremarkable, considering the cast. Goldie Hawn plays Mona, who catches her husband, played by Gary Shandling, having an affair. She confides in her lifelong best friend, Porter, played by Warren Beatty, while helping Goldie Hawn sort through this pending divorce and the emotional tragedy of the infidelity. The two of them have an affair. And then that brings Diane Keaton, who is Warren Beatty's wife, into the picture, because she confides in Goldie Hawn that she thinks he's having an affair, which he's right, she is, with just different women. And then
a cellist.
And we got so much cool stuff to talk about with Goldie Hawn. I don't know if I want to spend any time on this. Let me give you the things I think are fun. Filming began for this movie in 1998 with a budget of $44 million, including $10 million fronted by Warren Beatty. And it would eventually balloon to over $100 million. Script wasn't finished when they began filming this movie, but they wrote it as the filming progressed. Beatty caused several filming issues with his insistence on numerous takes for many scenes. Because of that, the filming took so long that roles played by Gary Shandling and Diane Keaton, they had to leave to film other movies that they had contractually obligated to. So it wouldn't be another year until the entire cast could get together. So this movie was doomed from the beginning. It had 12 release date changes.
Never good.
The studio said, this movie stinks, and we're going to lose a shitload of money. Let's find the one weekend where there's no good movies out, and let's try to put it out of that. This movie stunk.
Yeah, Christina, while I was with her for her birthday, I had this one on in the background, and she was thoroughly unimpressed with my movie choice.
Yeah.
But we were getting down to the nitty-gritty. I was like, Town and Country. Here it is. And the movie's just bizarre, man. At a certain point where there might be some momentum kicking, then they take off, he and Gary Shandling, a log cabin, and then the dad gets in the way, and Andy McDowell's with bunnies and stuffed animals, and it's just a bizarre film, man. Do not recommend.
This was the sentence I used to summarize the plot. This is a hapless story about the super rich doing whatever they want to whoever they want, whenever they want.
Accurate.
Keep it moving.
And Gary Shandling's such a funny guy, and to see him in a thoroughly unfunny role like this is just heartbreaking to see. The other thing to note here, Case, is this was her first Razzie nom. She gets a second one in 2017.
Film critic Nathan Rabin had a review that has a line in it that I think is particularly apt for our podcast. And when reviewing Town and Country, he said, this is the rare movie that can't seem to decide whether it wants to be Freddie Got Fingered or Hannah and Her Sisters.
Tom Green and a Woody Allen film, things you love to hear. Can't go right either way, as they say.
I don't think that was a complimentary statement. I'll finish it with that.
All right, well, let's round it out. Everything 2002 to the present day. More executive producer credits there in the early 2000s. So she produced When Billy Beat Bobby, notoriable film there in the early 2000s. And then the Matthew Shepard Story. 2002, she teamed up with Susan Sarandon and got another Golden Globe nom for her role as Suzette in The Banger Sisters, which I think was a nice reprisal from some of the stuff we hadn't seen in many years from Goldie Hawn. The Banger Sisters are hot-ass mess. I remember watching this for the Sarandon episode.
Mm-hmm.
In 2003, she established the Hawn Foundation, which goes towards funding youth education programs. So it's a cool little off-the-screen thing. Kind of putting her money where her mouth is.
Also founded a youth mental health organization by the name of Mind Up, which I always like to check in on these and see how they're currently doing, because there's a lot of work, obviously, that goes into this world. And this one's still going strong. So proud to see that it wasn't just an idea that fell flat.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Something that was a PR stunt that ended up not being sustainable in the long term. That's good.
She doesn't strike me in her career to do a lot of unauthentic things.
When you have 39 credits, you're not taking every job that comes your way.
Yeah.
We didn't cover it, but I'm sure there are plenty of roles she was offered in the 70s and 80s that she turned down. That it was probably like, holy shit, what if Goldie Hawn had done this?
Had to be the case.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. She doesn't do anything noteworthy for 10 years between 2003 and 2013. She comes back and does an episode of Phineas and Ferb in 2013. I mean, she didn't have to do anything. She's got a career. She's got money. She's a Kurt. She's got successful kids. She's practically retired without being fully retired.
Yeah, she got grandkids at this point, man.
Yeah, doesn't have to do this anymore. But she did come back to play Linda, a.k.a. Amy Schumer's mom, in Snatched in 2017. Back just in time to get her another Razzie nom.
All right, there it is.
Schumer lured her out of retirement and told Fox I'm not doing the movie unless Goldie Hawn is doing it. Hawn's
yep.
What? What's going on? And she did it. Yeah, it worked, obviously.
Goldie Hawn was a huge inspiration and hero to Amy Schumer, and you're 100% right.
How big of a star Amy Schumer was for a brief amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
Huge star.
Yeah, that burned bright for 3 or 4 years.
Do we think she earned a Razzie nom, or did she get it because everyone started to hate Amy Schumer and she was in her movie?
I've consistently disagreed with Razzie noms. I haven't seen this movie, but just knowing the time period, I would venture to guess you're probably closer to accurate with that last part, Kyle.
Tied to her.
Why did it turn on Amy Schumer till after this?
Yeah, I don't know what year.
This movie was bad, but it was anticipated. I remember it being anticipated. I saw this movie. I don't remember very much about it, except that it is very bad. I think this was a pile-on situation, because that's what the Razzies to do. The movie was so bad that it was everybody involved then gets a Razzie because it was bad.
I agree with Aubrey. I'm a big Amy Schumer fan.
What I'm hearing is maybe not the best reason to come out of retirement and to do a film.
Uh-huh. That's it right there.
It's definitely one of those that probably sounded good on paper or over the phone.
It says something to her pop culture that she was such a get, but unfortunately not a great product on the back end. And then the only other two ones she's had since then, tied to Kurt Russell playing Santa, Christmas Chronicles Part 1 and 2 on Netflix. She plays Mrs. Claus. I watched half to 2/3 of the first Christmas Chronicles, and I didn't see her show up, so I assume she only shows up very briefly at the end.
I don't think she's in the first one.
I don't either.
She must make a very brief appearance because it's on her IMDb.
I know she's in the second one. All I remember from the first one, they go out of the way to make Santa hot, but they really drive the point home, and I found that very funny. The CGI dwarves. I thought it was going to be horrific. And I remember it wasn't that bad. And I was like, I don't know how I feel about this movie anymore.
Got decent reviews.
Yeah.
Not awful.
And let's get one more Kurt Russell in there. How many other actors have played Elvis and Santa? I mean, come on, people.
Okay. We've reached the mountaintop. Case, what do we got? Top performances.
All right. So tonight's list comes from a podcast favorite and old reliable, Gold Derby, Goldie Hawn Films, 10 Best Movies Ranked, which was released in November 18th, 2023.
What you said wasn't Kevin Brockmeyer, so I'm a little lost as to what we're talking about here.
Are you talking about the Babe Ruth of film reviewing? The Brockmeyer?
I don't see a Goldie Hawn list on Kevin Brockmeyer's website. Here's the context of the list. It's now been over 50 years that Goldie Hawn won her first Oscar as Best Supporting Actress. One of the most successful comic actresses for decades, Hawn has been a staple on the award scene, earning a second Oscar nom and a total of 8 Golden Globe nods, plus 1 win. Let's take a look back at 10 of her greatest films ranked worst to best. Greatest films ranked worst to best.
Wildcats. I want it on here.
Out the gate.
Wildcats is not on the list.
Gold Derby. Brockmire would have put it on there. I'm firmly confident in that.
Hell yeah, he would have.
Give me Death Becomes Her just because I want to follow the same format.
Death Becomes Her is number 3.
Oh, wow.
Number 3.
Interesting. I thought it was going to be like 10 at best.
Private Benjamin.
Private Benjamin is number 1.
Oh.
Cactus Flower.
Cactus Flower is number 4.
Sugarland Express.
Sugarland Express is number 5.
Okay. Vindication.
We've talked about every movie on here. We've possibly talked about one for a short bit, but everything else we covered.
Shampoo.
Shampoo is number 6.
Butterflies Are Free.
Butterflies Are Free is number 9.
Is Swing Shift on that list?
Swing Shift is number 8. So we're missing number 2, number 7, and number 10. And we've only been wrong on one of them. Dollars is not on the list.
Oh, number 2 is probably First Wives Club. Watch it.
First Wives Club is number 2. Uh-huh.
Big 90s Goldie Hawn fan here, huh?
Overboard.
We're missing number 7 and number 10. I believe I heard Aubrey say Overboard.
I'm going Overboard.
He's going overboard with that guess, but go ahead.
Aubrey, Overboard is your third movie not on the list.
I guarantee that Foul Play is on that list, number 10. I'm calling it now.
Foul Play is number 7.
Oh, okay.
We're just missing number 10 right now.
Christmas Chronicles Part 2.
James, try Wildcats again.
Christmas Chronicles Part 2 is not on the list.
I bet it's the one with Burt Reynolds. I bet it's Best Friends.
It is not Best Friends. The final movie on the board is the 2002 The Banger Sisters.
Oh.
Don't completely hate the list.
Okay.
So you talked about heavy in the 90s. There's only two movies on here in the 90s, number 2 and number 3. There's a movie from the 60s. There's 4 movies from the 70s, only 2 movies from the 80s, and only 1 movie past 2000.
Let the record stand. It's not that I said it was heavy on the 90s. It's just absurdly high on the movies in the 90s.
That's fair.
Death Becomes Her and First Wives Club says movies 2 and 3 is a little bit aggressive.
I hesitated using this list because Town and Country wasn't on there, but then I thought it might throw you guys a little bit. So that's why I picked this list. But overall, I think it's a pretty good list.
I feel pretty good that Brockmire wouldn't put Town and Country on his, so I think we're good there.
You talk about the legend, the GOAT?
Prolific. That's what you pick, a prolific reviewer for a prolific actor. Let's go, baby.
That's exactly right.
Okay, thanks, Face. All right, let's get into the Munson Meter. What we do, we rate every actor on a scale of 0 to 100 based on a variety of factors that could include anything from longevity, project choice, pop culture impact, acting range, awards footprint, other talents, personal life, comedic chops, box office success, or anything else that matters to us as Munsons. So this time we'll start with James.
Yeah, so when I think of Goldie Hawn, and after watching her movies, she's just like queerly playing something that is close to who she is. I think she came up with the ditzy blonde, right, and who was also kind of tongue in cheek, but she's more so of like the kind of carefree hippie who's also quick-witted, and I think she does a good job portraying that. The one thing I think she does a really good job of is making those kind of diva-like characters likable. Reminds me of a lot of like Clueless, where like you should hate Cher, but you don't. You're kind of rooting for her.
Yeah.
And I think that is kind of how she comes across, where like, oh, the beautiful woman who doesn't have a care in the world, who everything kind of goes how she wants. Like, you shouldn't like that person, but because of who she is, you do. And I think she does a really good job with that persona. I don't think she has a great range. Like I mentioned before, one thing she brings to the table that not everyone does is she clearly can connect with her co-stars. And maybe it is because she might be playing something that's a little closer to who she is. But not everyone can do that. And she was able to do that in almost every role that I saw of her, even in movies that weren't good. She was able to bounce that energy off of somebody else, which I thought was really impressive. She has 2 Oscar nominations and a win, both for comedies, which is nothing to sneeze at. For someone who I've mentioned I don't believe has a lot of range, like these are like massive accomplishments. And she's Hollywood royalty. And she became Hollywood royalty during a time when pretty much men were just like animals in Hollywood. and that is incredibly impressive. I think in her personal life, they just seem like the coolest parents ever. Her and Kurt Russell, their kids all love them like crazy, even though they're like an incredibly blended family. So she just seems like a great person. I just personally, a lot of her movies aren't meant for me, and I don't see the range that I see in other actors that we've covered, but I still think she is a legend in the field. And so I'm going to give her a 73.
All right. Aubrey.
I was very excited for this episode, and I was very excited to kind of get into this career because this is one of the actors that I've done that I had seen the least amount of movies on. And so I think I saw Sugarland Express and Snatched. Those are the movies that I had seen going into this. So I was really excited to kind of close this loop, like check this box. Like this is, as James said, Hollywood royalty, and I'm familiar with this person, and I wanted to see what I was going to get. Early on, struck very quickly by her charisma, her charm, and just, she's a movie star. It's one of those things where like, you just have someone and they're just a star.
Yeah.
And as I kept watching more and more movies, I continued to see the same thing. And so it made me think of two people that I had done before. And comparisons are always tricky, but I just continuously thought about them when I would think about her abilities and what she brings to the screen. I thought about Cameron Diaz a lot, and I thought about Gina Davis.
Mm-hmm.
Cameron Diaz a lot because Cameron Diaz was the same thing. Cameron Diaz is a star. She is a bona fide movie star. Whether or not she is quote unquote good at acting is largely irrelevant because she is impossible to turn away from. I want to see what she's doing. And that's Goldie Hawn. Every time she jumps on the screen, I perk up, I pay attention, and I'm interested in what she's doing. That's a huge accomplishment. Gina Davis is a star, but she also has the acting chops to elevate her to a place that Cameron Diaz kind of never got to. I see Goldie Hawn as kind of the reverse. She's a bigger star than she is good actor. And that's not a detriment to her acting. It's just, she's just such a star. It's so interesting to see everything that she does.
Yep.
And so I have her falling in between the two of them because while she does have the Oscar, it's a tricky Oscar win. So on judging those, you kind of do what you want to with that. She has a ton of Golden Globe noms, but who cares about Golden Globe nominations?
Mm-hmm.
The show notes.
Yeah, she's undeniably a good actor, but I'm just taken away about how charismatic she is. So I've got her in the middle of the two people that I mentioned. I've got her at a 77.
Okay.
Well, I don't think it's any mystery that I'm a huge Goldie Hawn fan. This is one of those trap episodes for me because I go in knowing that I'm a fan, right? When I watch things, is it going to start taking away from what I already appreciate about her? I'm not going to lie to you guys. I cheated, and I worked backwards from what I know about Goldie Hawn. I didn't watch a lot of her 80s stuff because I know all of it. So I watched a lot of the stuff in the 70s where she needed to rely a little bit more on her acting ability than she did her star power. Her charisma it's hypnotizing. I mean, it is just hard to not pay attention to her. And I was thoroughly impressed as an actor on what she did in a lot of her 70s roles. I just think she's incredible. I think the fact that she was a female lead actor in the 80s and then went to producing her own stuff. She was not only a huge star in Hollywood, in my opinion, she was a force in Hollywood that probably made a lot of changes to the industry. And she did it in a way that wasn't terribly controversial, wasn't abrasive. She just went out and she changed as much as she could in her own way. And I really appreciate that. The amount of producing she's done, the amount of iconic roles that she's done. I go back to the first thing that I remember her doing, and that was Laugh-In. And she changed that show, and it was already a great show. And so for her ability to just be iconic and have an impact on Hollywood and television, I'm going to give her an 86.
I'll round us out. She kind of breaks my scale in a frustrating way because, much to your guys' points, what she does really well, she does really well. But I think there's some kinks in the armor. There's some things that you just don't really see unless you do a deep dive like this. But it's hard to get better than coming out of the gate with your first film role, earning an Oscar. To Aubrey's point, whether or not it's deserved is a different story, but at least catching people's attention right away is a big deal. I thought she did a great job leveraging her role as the ditzy blonde on Laugh-In into a pretty successful Hollywood career where she's pretty widely known for small filmography. She packs a lot of punch for the fact, like, just in pure screen time, she's a lot less than a lot of actors we've covered. I think she's widely known by people our age or older, but I think if you asked a lot of young people, they'd have no clue who Goldie Hawn is. They might know her through her kids, especially Wyatt Russell with younger audiences, but from a pop culture standpoint, like I'm sure if you ask Aubrey's students, like a lot of them are not going to know who Goldie Hawn is unless they watch Christmas Chronicles 1 and 2. Like that's it. So that says something as well about kind of how I scale. And I feel affirmed by you guys because I had the same feeling as I watched more of her work. I found myself not terribly impressed by her acting range. I got a lot of the same things. It was a particular beat, and she was hammering away on that. There wasn't a lot of dynamic ranges to how she approached dramatic work. But, I mean, she's a bona fide movie star, and that's worth something. But to James's point, she was really good with chemistry, but just not the most range in the world, which is perfect because I really like James's score because I was thinking the same thing. I think I'm going to go with the 73 as well. And that is going to put Goldie Hawn into 39th place with a 77.25. which puts her just behind Chris Rock and just ahead of Elliot Page. So a little bit higher than that box office score, which was a 60.
I think the name carries so much like weight to it. Like the pop culture impact definitely weighs heavy with her for sure. And Kyle, your score was brilliant.
Beautiful, right?
I'd say it's probably the best score you could possibly give her.
Okay. All right, Aubrey, what has she got coming?
2 things listed on IMDb. One's in development, so there's like nothing about it. And I'd be really interested to see how long that takes to come close to production. The one thing she has in production will turn some heads. It's called A Childhood History Plan. And 3 women are forced to spend Christmas together along with their children and grandchildren after the man they were all once married to drops dead in a New York City department store. And the 3 people that are starring in that, Goldie Hawn, Diane Keaton, Bette Midler.
Awesome.
That one will be a fun one to watch. It's still in pre-production. That'll be a fun one to see what happens with that and how that lands.
They missed a golden opportunity to name that film The 3 Wives Club, and I'm disappointed in them. That's going to be cool to see those 3 return.
There's potential for that movie to do well.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Included into that is the script that's been put up for Diva Nation.
Yeah, that was the other one that was in development.
Yeah. And also Diane Keaton and Bette Midler. So I guess the 3 of them are going to be cashing some checks.
They're getting reminded of that 191 million. They're like, how do we capture that? That. Can we do that? Can we do that? Because we're struggling with our choices right now, people. Okay, 5 actors we're throwing on the wheel for the next episode 107. It's going to drop on September 26th. We've got Chip Hessenflow coming back. He was with us for James Marsden, Emma Thompson, Matthew Broderick, Andy McDowell, and Steve Carell. The Wheel selected one of these 5 actors, and Chip decided to come join us to talk about this actor. So we have Bruce Greenwood, Neil McDonough, Juno Temple, Juliet Binoche, and Amy Poehler. Good list.
That is a good list for sure.
It's only one choice for me. I need this to be Juliet Binoche.
I know you do.
I'll take time off work for that.
You just want to watch Chocolat on repeat. That's what you want to watch.
She's like top 5 for me. She's one of my favorite actors. I think this will be a really high score for me. She's one of those actors that's like, if you know, you know.
Yeah.
She's like GOAT level good to me.
She's an actor's actor. One of those situations like you asked, what's your favorite actor? Oh, Juliet Binoche.
Yep.
Okay. How about a second one down the list other than Juliet? What else we like?
I mean, I like a lot of this list, to be quite honest. It's like a good range. Like, obviously, Amy Poehler is a comedic force, but like Juno Temple's kind of young, but she's really good in Ted Lasso. I don't really know her from other things. It'd be interesting to see if there are other stuff.
Season 4.
Oh, yeah.
Just got announced, too. So if anybody was looking for a reason to watch.
Neil McDonough.
I like Neil McDonough.
Dude, like everything I see him in, I like him in, and I just don't see him in enough things, you know? Like I've enjoyed him in almost every role he's been in. He's usually playing an asshole, and he's a great asshole.
We'd watch some good flicks if we covered Neil McDonough. I feel good about that. Walking Tall.
Oh, dude, when I think of him, it's probably more TV shows, to be quite honest.
Band of Brothers.
Band of Brothers, that's right.
Yellowstone, Desperate Housewives, Suits. He's in the Angels in the Outfield.
There's a
Bruce Greenwood's fun too.
Bruce Greenwood was in a great HBO show called John from Cincinnati.
Oh, yeah.
Worth a rewatch on that. That was a fun show. Weird as hell, but fun.
I've never seen Gerald's Game. I've heard good things. I feel like I'd finally have an opportunity to watch Gerald's Game.
I loved Boomtown when it came out with Neil McDonough, and it got canceled after 1 season, and I realized I was probably the only person who ever watched that show.
You get National Treasure with Bruce Greenwood. You would get iRobot, Star Trek.
My vote would be Juno Temple.
Okay.
That's the least amount of credits.
I just got to rewatch Ted Lasso, and apparently she's in Fargo, which everyone's told me a million times. I got to watch that show.
She got 60 credits. That's a lot for.
She's got some interesting stuff.
Yeah.
She's got some interesting stuff.
The Call. Let's see. Maleficent. Fargo. 10 episodes of Fargo most recently. Who would Chip pick?
I think Juliet Binoche has a real good chance of being the pick.
I'll get my hopes up. Don't do this to me.
Based on the profile I'm building with his other one, I think there's a room for Neil McDonough in there.
I feel like that's where this is going.
I feel like I got a shot as well. Yeah, it was pretty good.
The prevailing wisdom here is Neil McDonough. Okay. Well, we'll see. Chip doesn't decide. Dan Craig doesn't decide. I don't decide. I swear. Scott's honor. The wheel decides, and we'll see what happens.
That's going to be fun.
Well, as we wrap up, you can always catch us on X, Munsons at Movies. You catch us on Instagram, Munsons at the Movies. You can email us, munsonsatthemovies@gmail.com. Any final thoughts from Goldie Hawn?
You owe me a new stopwatch! You pussy!
Let's go. Thank you for the education, gentlemen. We've just received a PhD in stupidity. Doctor, shall we?
Hi, Dad.
Hi.
I don't really need your help. I just wanted to let you know that I'm going to win the $1 million. Because the U.S. president appeared on Laughing as Richard Nixon. That's my final answer.